Today we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations using something called the quadratic formula. Just a reminder that when we're solving quadratic equations, this means that we are finding x-intercepts. All right, so you are going to have to write some stuff down here. So if you do, I don't have anything for you to print out. So if you do have your notebook nearby or you don't have your notebook, you need to pause and get your notebook open and label it the quadratic formula. So one of the things we need to know about x-intercepts is it also has a few other names. So solutions, roots, zeros, you may have problems to ask you for any of these terms. They're all just referring to the x-intercepts. Okay, so this is an important thing right here in green that you should have written down. Now the next part you don't have to write down. I'm just going to kind of review what we have already gone over and learned. So we have already talked about how to solve by factoring. So when you factor, you set it up in intercept form here, and then you set each of those factors equal to 0, and that gets you your x-intercepts. All right, graphing, we know that when we graph it and see where it crosses the x-axis, then that gives you the x-intercepts. Completing the square, we practiced yesterday, and then square roots we did a lesson on Friday over. So all of these methods do have limitations, meaning we can't always use them, right? So sometimes we have a quadratic equation that cannot be factored at all, or maybe it's really hard to factor it, and maybe you're not really good at factoring, and so that's just not the method that's best for you. Sometimes when we're graphing, it doesn't cross directly on the grid lines to where we can see a nice pretty whole number. Maybe it's 2.5 or 2.7, and it's a little hard to approximate. So those aren't necessarily the best methods to use when you have those decimal values. Completing the square gets a little difficult when you have an odd number for b. If b is odd number, we end up dividing it by 2, and then we end up having fractions and decimals throughout the rest of the problem. So it's possible you can do it. It's also a little tougher when you have a greater than 1. So completing the square, it has some limitations to it. Square roots can only be used when you are when you have a missing b term, right? So in these cases, I can't use square root solving. I have to have something that looks like this where the b term is missing. So all of these methods have limitations. We are going to talk today about a fifth method, which does not have any limitations. You can use it with any quadratic equation, no matter what. And that is called the quadratic. I need to write this down, okay? So here's our standard form, which we're familiar with. Okay, standard form ax squared plus bx plus c. We need to make sure our quadratic equation is set equal to 0. So if there's a number over here, we need to add or subtract it over to the left side so that everything is on one side of the equal sign. And then this is it, all right? This is my quadratic formula. It looks scary, I know, but we're going to talk about how to break it down into pieces where it's really easy. And it really is just a matter of knowing what A is, what B is, what C is, and then replacing those with numbers in the formula. And then the rest is the calculator's job. Right, so the quadratic formula, there are some ways to memorize it. I'm not going to make you memorize it, but most teachers do. I will provide it for you if you ever do need it. But one fun way that teachers have their students memorize it is they put the formula to a song. Right, so when I was in school, I had to memorize it, and my teacher had us memorize it to the tune of Row, Row, Row Your Boat. So I'll give you an example of what that sounds like, right? So x equals is how we start because we're solving for x, the x-intercept. X equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Right? Or you may hear it to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel, which sounds like x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. X squared plus 4x minus 21, and it is set equal to 0 already, so we're ready to identify what our A or B and or C are. So that's our first step, is find out what A, B, and C are and label them. So I have right here, it's lined up for you to set them up. You need to be writing this down as we go along. And then substitute our A, B, and C into the equation in the spots that they are lined up. So, and then we'll talk about simplifying from there. All right, so first let's identify A, B, and C. So A is in front of the x squared term. If I don't see anything, then I know that that is a 1. So A is a positive 1, B is a positive 4, and C is a negative 21, right? So make sure you account for the signs. It's really important, right? So let's go ahead and start with our formula. So x equals negative b. All right, negative b here, right? That means the opposite sign of b. So if my b is a positive 4, that means I'm going to now have a negative 4 up front. All right, then plus or minus square root. All right, and then underneath, b squared minus 4ac. So b is 4. So b squared minus 4ac. A is 1. And c is negative 21. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble writing that down. All right, negative 21. So all over 2a, so that's 2 times a, which is 1. Okay. Let's go ahead and what I want to do is I want to simplify what's underneath the radical first. So I want to look at this stuff here. Let's clean that up because that's the bulk of my formula. And if I can get that down to one number, it's going to look a whole lot better. So we're going to start with that first. And that really, you can just plug right on into the calculator as you see it. All right. So I'm going to talk about how to just simplify it by hand, right? So x equals my negative b plus or minus the square root. And my b squared is just 4 squared, or 4 times 4. So that's 16. And then I'm going to think about this set of numbers as negative 4 times negative 21 times 1. Right? So negative 4 times negative 21 I know is going to become a positive number. Right? So when I'm multiplying this 4, I'm actually multiplying on negative 4. So this is going to calculate that up, and that becomes positive, see if it'll let me do it, 84. Yay. All right, all over 2 times 1, which is just 2. All right, so now it's looking a little smaller. All right, I still need to simplify what's underneath the radical, and that's just adding, right? So 16 plus 84, I add those up, and I get 100. So I'm going to write this as x equals negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 100. Hey, and we know what the square root of 100 is. It is just 10. Right? So we're going to simplify that in a second, right after we now separate this into two problems. So this is kind of where we were at the completing the square and the solving by square roots problem. Whenever we have this plus or minus, right, we know that we're going to, right here, this plus or minus, we're going to separate it into two problems. So we're going to separate that now. And we have, as soon as I get my pen back. Right, so I have two problems. The first one is x equals, and I've got negative 4 plus the square root of 10. And I know that the square root of 10 is, square root of 100 is 10. So I'm going to clean, right, all over 2. Right, and then the second one, instead of plus, it's now going to be minus. So I have x equals negative 4 minus 10 all over 2. Okay, so now I'm going to simplify, and the one on the left, I have negative 4 plus 10. Well, I'm going to simplify that down to 6. So x equals 6 over 2. And I know that 6 over 2 is just 3. All right, and so that means my first x-intercept is 3, 0. All right, the second one, I'm going to simplify here. I have negative 4 minus 10 gives me negative 14 over 2. And then that just simplifies down to negative 7. So my second x-intercept is negative 7, 0. Okay. Oh, last example we're going to do. We're going to do one more, so go ahead and write this example down. This is 2x squared minus 3x minus 5. All right, so I have an a of 2. I have a b of negative 3. That's important. Note that you have a negative sign there, and I have a c of negative 5. All right. So let's go ahead and this time I'll sing it to Pop Goes the Weasel this time. So I know y'all love my singing. If you've still stuck around. All right, so x equals negative b. Oh, wait, well, my b is already negative. So then remember, that means I'm going to use the opposite sign. So that's actually going to now be a positive 3. And I cannot write 3s on this smartboard. All right, positive 3 plus or minus square root and b squared minus 4ac. So that's negative 3 squared 4 times a times c, which is a negative 5. Okay, and write that down. All over 2a. So that's going to be 2 times, oops, not a. 2 times, and then my a is also 2. All right, so now I'm going to simplify what's under the radical. We'll start there. Let's simplify what's under the radical. And starting with that negative 3, we know that when we square negative 3, we're going to get a positive 9. All right, so I get x equals, this is positive 3 plus or minus square root. It's easy to sing. And then negative 3 squared is going to be 9. Right? Now remember, I want to look at this as negative 4 times negative 5, which is a positive 20, and then times 2. So 20 times 2 is a positive 40. So I'm going to do plus 40, or you can plug all that into your calculator and let your calculator do the work. All over 2a. So 2 times 2 is just 4. I would like to write the number 4, please. Thank you. Okay. And now we're just going to simplify from there. So remember, I've got 2 problems here, a plus and a minus. So the first one, I'm going to move down a little bit. So the first one is x equals 3 plus, actually, I'm going to simplify what's under there, and that's square root of 49 because I didn't add those, all over 4. And now I'm going to separate it. So I get x equals 3 plus, and then I know that the square root of 49 is 7 over 4. And then I'm going to do x equals 3 minus 7 over 4. The first one is x equals 3 plus 7, which is 10. Right? And 10 over 4, I can divide that out, and it just becomes 2.5 or 2.5. All right, so that means my first x-intercept is 2.5, comma 0. All right, and then the second one is going to be x equals 3 minus 7, which is negative 4, over 4, and that's an easy one. That's negative 1. So my second x-intercept is negative 1, comma 0. 0. 0. There we go. All right, guys, I'm going to end this. I'm really sorry that the board is so wacky. And if you have any questions, we are going to do a help session this week. So make sure you check out your announcements so that you can join in for that, because I know a lot of you guys have some questions, definitely. So I miss you guys, and shoot me an email if you have any questions, and we will talk soon. Bye.